when you look at like the lineage of Star Wars actors, because you think like, oh, the original trilogy, you got a bunch of like no-name people because he didn't want you to have preconceived notions, and oh, you got people kind of at the beginning of their career for the prequel series, but it's like the stacks are, or the casts are so stacked.
And we didn't even talk about Liam Neeson, who like huge star then and now. Like it's
Yeah,
like
huge
it's
star then. I think this catapulted him to another level.
yeah, and also again but this was my first Liam Neeson thing where it's like now
I think I was aware of him, but this is the movie that made it be like, oh, Liam Neeson's in this, I got to see it.
yeah, exactly. So it's quite epic on its scope, and it is interesting. I think thinking about Ryan Gosling being in Starfighter, but this movie. And I don't think Liam Neeson was ever or will ever be at the stardom level of Ryan Gosling, but he's close. Like he was a big get at this time, like who brought a lot of prestige.
Him around like Taken. He had just came off Batman Begins as Ra's al Ghul, and then he does Taken, and Taken was like it was John Wick before John Wick. It was that big. So I think he was there just in a different way, because Ryan Gosling is also like, every woman loves Ryan Gosling. So
yeah, they're two different actors, I guess. Yeah, you're right, and both are iconic and known on their own rights. But this movie, again, not being aware of it as a kid, that had to grab a lot of people that someone as prestigious as Liam Neeson was starring in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it had to maybe be equivalent to something like Alec Guinness being in the first Star Wars.
That's what I was just about to say is Alec Guinness to me as a kid meant nothing. And then when you start watching older movies or even just looking at his IMDb, it's like, oh, they got a legend to be the old wizard to explain things, so that adults going to see this would be like, there has to be something to this weird space fantasy because Sir Alec Guinness is in this movie.
Yeah, and that's got to be kind of like Terrence Stamp is sort of the Peter Cushing actor in this as well, where it's like, we'll bring in this sort of...
Yeah, I could see that.
Classic British actor who's kind of also known for not being like a horror film direct actor or anything like that, but kind of be having his... Because of Superman, mostly, like he's known for being sort of a pulpy actor and things like that. So, that's cool. And then, there's just so many. This movie kind of really tries to bring back a lot of familiarity from classic Star Wars, which I think is something I appreciate more and more on rewatch. Is that this movie I always see it as like the smooth, like everything's like not as dirty, but there's a lot of like classic sort of Star Wars aesthetic in this movie, and it's just on a whole other level. Like the scope is so much more massive, and unlike the special editions, all of the scope and scale given to it by the CGI and the models and all the like extras feels natural with the filmmaking versus what we talked about last week with Return of the Jedi, where it just feels so disconnected from what you're actually watching on screen. It feels like additions and not like well integrated into the existing film.
Yeah, this one definitely it gets the benefit of having those things instead of adding them into an old movie. They were there from the start, so even if like when they're introducing all the pod racers, there's nothing on screen, nothing physical on screen, but it all looks the same because there's nothing physical on screen. So it's almost better to do it as animated as it was, so at least it's consistent. It gets a little bit wonky in like Attack of the Clones with all the clone armor. It's like it's starting to look like a video game cutscene, but because if there was 4 guys, physical guys in clone trooper armor, and then everyone else CG around them, it would be even worse.
Yeah, I agree there. I think that's another thing though, that this movie, I think for me, is the best looking of the prequel trilogy, and like VFX definitely improve over the next 2 films for sure, but this being shot on film like elevates its look to like whole other levels, where it's still like all the stuff like on location looks so much better than a lot of the stuff in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, because the lighting is so much better, and it seems like shots are much more almost like intentionally thought out and like planned out. Like there's this one shot that I really loved towards the end of the film that stood out to me, and there's a lot like this where it's when Boss Nass is making Jar Jar the general, and it starts on this like tracking shot of them walking and talking, and then Jar Jar does his shtick, he faints, and then there's like a the focus puller puts what's in the background into focus, and that establishes the next scene, which is Qui-Gon Jinn preparing the invasion of Naboo with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's so seamless and so well crafted as like a gag shot that was all one shot turning into an establishing shot for a next scene. I don't feel like that kind of gets lost in the next films, like that kind of filmmaking.
It's one of those things that because it's done so right, you don't see it.
Yeah.
It goes from an animated shot to a live action shot with a blur, but it's not like a blur across the whole camera. Like, yeah, how you described it is perfect because it does make it seem like Boss Nass and Jar Jar were just walking in a field and it's not a big deal. Even though, especially in 97, 98, when they made it, for it to come out in 99, that hadn't been done before. It's a dime a dozen now. It's every movie you put on now, but then that was new.
If you're getting value or entertainment out of any of my transmissions, it would mean a lot if you would join the Remnant and subscribe.
Well, and I have a very controversial take here too with that. That may piss you off and may piss other people off, but
all right, let's do it.
I think there's that famous, and it's good. It's a really good description of Dave Filoni explaining the Duel of the Fates sequence.
I love that clip. Holy crap!
Me too. But did you see that at all while watching this movie? Like, is that clear in the storytelling before you watch that Dave Filoni clip?
The Jedi part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe not as eloquently put, but all of his main points I do see, or did see before I saw that, in the lightsaber battle, not in anything else.
Yeah, I still, I don't think it's clear enough, why, the deeper meaning to that fight. I get the, on-screen, stakes of, we don't want Darth Maul killing the Queen, but, there's that poetry, that deeper meaning, I think is how, George Lucas keeps that too deep, I was talking about, this movie's subtle, but sometimes it's too subtle where it's I really think you could have hinted towards that more, with anything, but all the people close to him love him so much because he does engage, it seems with his collaborators on that deeper level of thinking things through, of how things are deeper in their meaning. So people like Filoni and Gary Kurtz and Ben Burt and John Knoll love working with George Lucas because he is so thoughtful with how things come out, but he isn't either bold enough to put some of that on screen or in the text. And it has to you need a further explanation after watching it to make it make sense. And that's sort of a weakness, I think, in storytelling where you can't grasp that right away or without thinking about it just a little bit harder. And you need a George Lucas to step in and explain to you what it means. And I think that's sort of a big flaw of the prequel films is that there's not enough there in the subtext. It's buried so far down that maybe you could see it, but it takes an explanation to see it instead of you just being able to appreciate it on screen. Does that make sense? I think that
it makes sense. I totally follow what you're saying. I'm trying to put myself back seeing this movie for the first time. I would have to think objectively the first time I saw it, it was a very cool lightsaber fight, and I liked Qui-Gon Jinn. It sucks that he died. But it probably wasn't until third, fourth, maybe even fifth viewing that you put the pieces together of Qui-Gon bringing Anakin to the council, saying, Obi-Wan's ready, I need a new Padawan, it's going to be Anakin. Them saying no. And then Qui-Gon, at this point, he's not saying, I'm going to train you anyway. He tells Anakin, I can't train you, but stick close, learn from me. And and this is where it might get confusing, or where you might be seeing it one way and I'm seeing it another way. I knew at 13 Anakin becomes Darth Vader.
Right.
Someone who's 9 or 10 watching The Phantom Menace as their first ever Star Wars, who in a couple years, The Empire Strikes Back is going to blow their mind. Well, I guess Revenge of the Sith would blow their mind, not Empire Strikes Back, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's still a reveal for them yet to come. Maybe someone, them not knowing, doesn't get the importance of Duel of the Fates because going in knowing that Anakin becomes Darth Vader, you know that he has two possible masters. It's going to go one way or the other. Or it could even be, if Qui-Gon dies, he doesn't get trained at all, and then what happens to this kid? So I think even without the Darth Vader reveal, it still is important The other thing I'm wondering is, before I knew the song and segment was called Duel of the Fates, did I know it? Because Duel of the Fates, I think, puts it right on the nose.
Yeah, it does. And I think that that's not in the film, though. And also, what's also not in the film is, like, what happens to Anakin if Qui-Gon dies? Like, does he go back to Tatooine?
Well, that comes up later. You don't know that at the time of the fight. And I think that's the whole point, is that his fate is in the balance.
Yeah, so but
I would still maintain... Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, no, I was just saying, I would like it would be great if in the film there was like if Qui-Gon dies, this happens to Anakin, that kind of thing. Like this, like if the council made it clear,
like put the state, like Qui-Gon, bring him home, and Qui-Gon's like, well, I can't, I got to do this Naboo thing, and he tells Anakin like, stick with me, like we'll win them over.
Right, yeah. Something like that. Where
I can see that, and I would have been fine with that, especially when you have the argument of, like, this is meant to be a new generation, new kids' way into Star Wars, is that you needed to be a little bit more on the nose for things.
Yeah.
I would still maintain, and I'm trying to be objective, that I did understand at least a good part of the stakes of the lightsaber battle before seeing the Filoni clip, but that Filoni clip and knowing the name of the song makes it, like, concrete genius.
Yeah, which I think, like, on rewatch, it's like it works as a, like, when you know the whole story, when you know from Phantom Menace to Return of the Jedi, Filoni's speech is awesome. Like when you're watching this movie now with that whole context of Darth Vader's story, that speech is great, and the knowing the name of the soundtrack, that kind of thing. That speech is great, but as it is on this film, I think it is sort of like, I wish it was clearer just as a movie, like what's at stake here. If that was the intention, like that should be clearer. If there's more at stake here than just the Queen might die, Anakin might not be trained, like that's sort of that's segment, sort of what I wish.
Padme doesn't even really cross my mind.
Yeah.
I'm already at, like, we're telling a Jedi story and we're telling a galaxy story, and she's part of the galaxy story. They're handling their own thing. This is all about Jedi.
Yeah. Which, like, I think part of that is also just how awesome the lightsaber fight is at that point, that you just immediately forget.
Especially like, think about it, like,
yeah,
that was the first, like, the Empire Strikes Back and the carbon freezing chamber's cool. Yeah. Even just seeing Alec Guinness take on David Prowse in A New Hope, it's like, just because they're lightsabers, it's cool. And then they did this, and they waited till the end of the movie to do it, and they waited till the end of the movie to show a double-bladed lightsaber, which is something that was not spoiled for me before I went into the movie, which I'm so glad it wasn't.
Yeah.
What a reveal.